Marriage as Figure and as Sacrament of the New Covenant. General Audience number 98 of October 20th, 1982. Last Wednesday, we spoke about the integral heritage of the covenant with God and about the grace originally united to the divine work of creation. Part of this integral heritage, as one can deduce from Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 to 33, was marriage as the primordial sacrament, instituted from the beginning and linked with the sacrament of creation in its totality. The sacramentality of marriage is not only a model and figure of the sacrament of the Church, of Christ and of the Church, but also constitutes an essential part of the new heritage, that of the sacrament of redemption with which the Church is endowed in Christ. Here one must go back once more to Christ's words in Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 through 9, referencing Mark chapter 10, verses 5 through 9, in which Christ, in responding to the question of the Pharisees about marriage and its specific character, appeals only and exclusively to its original institution by the Creator at the beginning. As we reflect about the meaning of this answer in the light of Ephesians, especially Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 to 33, we end up with a somehow double relation to marriage, to the whole sacramental order that emerges from the very sacrament of redemption in the new covenant. As the primordial sacrament, marriage constitutes, on the one hand, the figure, and thus the likeness, the analogy, according to which the underlying, weight-bearing structure of the new economy of salvation and the sacramental order is built, which springs from the spousal gracing that the Church receives from Christ with all the goods of redemption. One could say, using words from the beginning of Ephesians, with all spiritual blessings. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 3. Thus, as the primordial sacrament, marriage is assumed and inserted into the integral structure of the new sacramental economy, which has arisen from redemption in the form, I would say, of a prototype. It is assumed and inserted, as it were, from its very basis. In the dialogue with the Pharisees, Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 through 9, Christ himself confirms, first of all, its existence. If we reflect deeply on this dimension, we have to conclude that all the sacraments of the new covenant find their prototype in some way in marriage as the primordial sacrament. This seems to be what comes into view in the classical passage quoted from Ephesians, as we shall say again soon. However, the relation of marriage to the whole sacramental order, which has arisen from the Church's endowment with the benefits of redemption, is not limited only to the dimension of model. In his dialogue with the Pharisees, see Matthew chapter 19, Christ not only confirms the existence of marriage instituted from the beginning by the Creator, but he declares also that it is an integral part of the new sacramental economy, of the new order of salvific signs that draws its origin from the sacrament of redemption, just as the original economy emerged from the sacrament of creation. And in fact, Christ limits himself to the one and only sacrament, which was marriage instituted in the state of original justice and innocence of man, created as male and female in the image and likeness of God. The new sacramental economy, which is constituted on the basis of the sacrament of redemption, coming forth from the spousal gracing of the Church by Christ, differs from the original economy. It is, in fact, directed not toward the man of original justice and innocence, but toward the man burdened by the heritage of original sin and the state of sinfulness, status naturae lapsae. It is directed toward the man of the threefold concupiscence, according to the classical words of 1 John chapter 2, verse 16, toward the man in whom, quote, the flesh has desires contrary to the spirit, and the spirit has desires contrary to the flesh. Galatians chapter 5, verse 17, according to Pauline theology and anthropology, to which we have devoted much space in our earlier reflections. Following a deeper and more thorough analysis of the meaning of Christ's statement in the Sermon on the Mount about the concupiscent look as adultery of the heart, these considerations prepare us to understand marriage as an integral part of the new sacramental order that draws its origin from the sacrament of redemption, or from the great mystery, which, as the mystery of Christ in the Church, determines the sacramentality of the Church herself. These considerations also prepare us to understand marriage as a sacrament of the new covenant, whose saving work is to be organically linked with the ethos we defined in our earlier analyses as the ethos of redemption. See TOB Audience 46, paragraph 4, Audience 47, paragraph 5, and Audience 49, paragraphs 2 through 7. Ephesians, in its own way, expresses the same truth. It speaks, in fact, about marriage as a great sacrament in a broad paranetic context, namely, in the context of moral exhortations about the ethos that should characterize the life of Christians, that is, of those who are aware of their election, which is realized in Christ and the Church. The sacraments of the Church. Against this vast background of reflections emerging from reading Ephesians, especially chapter 5, verses 22 to 33, one can and must still touch upon the matter of the sacraments of the Church. The text quoted from Ephesians speaks about them in an indirect, and I would say secondary, though sufficient way, so that this matter too can find a place in our considerations. Yet, we should clarify, at least briefly, the meaning we are adopting in using the term sacrament, which is significant for our considerations. Up till now, in fact, we have been using the term sacrament in agreement with the whole biblical and patristic tradition in a wider sense than the one characteristic of traditional and contemporary theological terminology, which uses the word sacrament to indicate the signs instituted by Christ and administered in the Church, which express and confer divine grace on the person who receives particular sacraments. In this sense, each of the 7 sacraments of the Church is characterized by a definite liturgical action constituted by the word, form, and the specific sacramental matter, according to the widespread hylomorphic account that comes down to us from Thomas Aquinas and the whole scholastic tradition. In comparison with this restricted meaning, we used a wider and perhaps an older and more fundamental meaning of the term sacrament in our considerations. See TOB Audience 93, paragraph 4, with footnote. Ephesians, and especially chapter 5, verses 22 to 33, seems to authorize us specifically in this use. Here, sacrament means the very mystery of God, which is hidden from eternity, yet not in an eternal concealment, but first in its very revelation and realization, also in its revelation through realization. In this sense, we also spoke about the sacrament of creation and the sacrament of redemption. On the basis of the sacrament of creation, one must understand the original sacramentality of marriage, the primordial sacrament. In a further step, on the basis of the sacrament of redemption, one can understand the sacramentality of the Church, or rather the sacramentality of Christ's union with the Church, which the author of Ephesians presents in the likeness of marriage, of the spousal union of husband and wife. An attentive analysis of the text shows that in this case, what is at stake is not only a comparison in the sense of a metaphor, but a real renewal, or recreation, that is, a new creation, of what constituted the salvific content, in a certain sense, the salvific substance of the primordial sacrament. This observation has an essential significance, both for clarifying the sacramentality of the Church, the very significant words of Lumen Gentium 1 appeal to this, and for understanding the sacramentality of marriage understood as one of the sacraments of the Church.